through the McGee & Co line, it's definitely one of those areas that gets incredibly expensive quickly, especially if you're trying to buy sets of matching baskets for built-ins or just for storage in general. And even through their Target line, Studio McGee baskets are just a little bit more than I'm willing to spend, especially because I know eventually I will find a really great basket at the thrift store. For example, most recently at the Hartville thrift shop, I came across this really beautiful, just like perfect dark brown woven lidded hamper with a kind of linen insert. Best part is that it was only $4. So like everything, we're going to wash the insert, wash the basket, but the main thing that I really love about the McGee & Co hampers is that they have wheels. In order for us to add any kind of wheels to the bottom of these hampers, we need to have something inside of the basket for the wheels to kind of latch onto. So I like to just take some scrap wood that I have in my stash. This used to be an old shelf from our built-in, so I just measured the bottom of the thrifted basket and cut it down to the appropriate size. Another place besides the thrift store that you can find really great hampers like this is Marshall's or Home Goods clearance. This one is just $22. For the shape, I would just recommend using like a wood round, place it on the bottom of the inside of the hamper, and then you can attach the wheels that way. With our wood piece all measured out now, I'm just going to place this on the inside of the basket, and we're going to turn the basket now on its side so we can attach our wheels. So the wheels that I'm using, I've already had. I repurposed them from another project to add to this basket. Just place the wheels basically on the inside of the corners there, making sure that the screws I'm using are long enough to reach that wood piece and stay nice and put. With the insert washed now, there were just a few small little holes there that I just needed to repair, so I just used some needle and thread. Luckily, the holes were just right on the seam, so it was very easy to disguise these, and it is good as new. Baskets similar to these from McGee & Co can be over $100, so the fact that I was able to create this look for just about $4 because I had all of the other supplies already is a major savings. Moving along now into trays, which are just such an essential part for corralling and reducing visual clutter. McGee & Co has such beautiful options made of really good quality materials like marble and travertine, but they do come at a pretty hefty price tag. Which of course now brings us to the thrift store. And while I would say finding really high quality, heavy duty materials for trays is not impossible, it's just more rare. So let's go the route of repurposing instead. No matter how bad your thrift store is, one thing that you can almost always find are some sort of wall art pieces that can now become trays. For example, I found this little round wall art piece that was just $1 at the Hartville thrift shop. First thing we are going to do is just remove any components that are meant for this piece to be hung up on the wall, because we will be using this as a tray. Everything always gets a good dusting and clean. And really, I mean, the choice is yours. I'm just choosing to use a spray paint that I already had, which is this black enamel spray paint. And that is really just to keep the cost low for this project. Spray paint can be expensive, so I always recommend using what you already have to get the look that you're trying to achieve. In order for me to make this feel more like a tray, I considered either giving it some handles on either side or just elevating it a bit, which you'll see of quite often through the McGee & Co line. They'll have little ball feet or just some sort of way to raise the tray. I had found several of these tables, and this time I'm just going to use the legs from one of those tables, and I'm just going to cut down that final bottom section there and just raise the tray up ever so slightly using these, cut them down using my miter saw, just gave them a quick little scuff sand to the top so they would be nice and flush when we go to attach them. Because all of the pieces we're working with are wood and really lightweight, I felt totally comfortable just using some Gorilla Wood glue in this case because it is very strong, especially when you're not having to uphold something that's really heavy. Just spaced those out equally, and then again, just spray painted them using the same spray paint we used for the top, and this was the end result. A different kind of variation of the same idea, again, is to just take some sort of a wall art sign that can be the shape of a tray, remove any hardware that is meant for it to be hung up on the wall, and save these because you can always reuse them for other projects. For this project, I decided to separate the bottom from all of the sides. MAJOR & Co. uses a lot of fabric covered boxes and trays, so I had so much of this grass cloth wallpaper left over. So we are going to cover this now tray with all of this fabric. As any contact paper, you always just want to make sure that you are kind of pulling in a diagonal motion and just smoothing everything out as you go. Which is, again, when you can separate things to kind of get the absolute cleanest finish possible, it just makes it that much easier for application, and it gives it a really kind of like factory-like finish. Also, don't forget about the bottom. Everything gets covered with this fabric, smoothed out, so it looks like you've bought it at a store and not like a DIY project. My husband likes to tell me that I'm a hoarder, and I like to tell him that I'm a collector. So I have a ton of hardware that I collect over time. And it's times like these that I'm really grateful that I do, because I found the perfect hardware for this little DIY tray, took some quick measurements, drilled a hole using a drill bit just slightly smaller than the screws I would need. I didn't like that the screws were silver and the handles were like a brushed brass. So I just went in with some gold leaf just to kind of make those match a little bit better. And that really wraps it up for this project. The only new thing I truly had to buy for this DIY tray was the wall art, which only cost $1.75. So a major savings in the grand scheme of things when you can just DIY a little bit yourself. Now, as it's getting darker earlier, especially in these winter months, rather than put up artwork, I think a nice option is to hang up a wall sconce. So when I found this one at the Hartford Thrift Shop for just $1, I loved the mix of materials here, kind of with like that stone, almost looked like roofing material, and then metal, of course. So starting off by, again, just separating everything, giving it a good clean. Because I didn't want to use a pillar candle or even just a real tapered candle, I wanted to use a battery operated taper candle that I also found at the thrift store. I needed to cut down that prong there so it would be able to fit inside. So I just did so using my hacksaw. So in order for that taper candle to have a place to sit inside of, I just used one of these little plastic pieces that you can get for less than $1 at the hardware store. I choose the size that's 3/4 of an inch because that's generally the diameter of most taper candles. And to attach it, I just use some Gorilla Glue that is designed for metal, which is kind of essential in a project like this one. To give it a more kind of luxe look instead of rustic, I decided to use some metallic brass spray paint, and I just gave several light coats until the whole thing was completely covered, and then just gave a dusting of some metallic oil rubbed bronze spray paint just to give it a little bit of variation. I painted the stone piece first just with some matte white paint, and then taking some watered down antiquing wax, just kind of brushed that on, and then just removed any excess with a paper towel just to give a kind of lightened look. Attached the two pieces together, and this was the end result. Because I had all of the other supplies, this really only cost $1, and I think it's the perfect thing to put on the wall during these colder winter months. Okay, so we brought it in. There's some pilling happening here. It obviously needs to be cleaned, but otherwise it is gonna provide me with, again, some really nice storage in here. But it was super affordable because I shopped it secondhand. Headed over to Hobby Lobby and found this really beautiful fabric that was just the perfect neutral that complemented the rug that was in there. Started off by just removing the hinges and any of the pieces that connected the top to the bottom of the ottoman. By separating them, it's going to provide me the cleanest finish when I go to reupholster. Starting off with the bottom, I just measured each side and then applied it to the fabric, and then buzzed each of those corners through the sewing machine twice just to make sure they were really nice and sturdy, and then just slid it around the existing fabric to cover it. Before stapling it down, I just needed to make sure all of the corners were lining up correctly, removed the legs from the bottom, and then it was time to work on the top. Wrapped that top piece around, and then of course just making sure that the corners not only line up with the top, but also with the bottom of the ottoman. And I know sewing takes an extra step, but it makes stapling a breeze because now the corners are kind of already done. I just have to attach the fabric now to the inside of the ottoman. With the top piece done, then I just needed to reattach those two pieces together using those same brackets and hinges that were there to begin with. I'm still not crazy about the inside, how that looks, so eventually I will go in with a cheaper fabric and just reline the inside so you don't see any staples. So altogether, this ottoman cost under $50 and provides me with all the storage I need and is the perfect thing to kind of ground this space in front of the window. Moving along now into lighting, this was a previous thrift flip that I shared where we have this kind of faux aged brass dome pendant that is made to look like it's hardwired, but it's not. But as I was kind of changing other components in the room, that dome pendant just seemed too heavy for the space. And some of you might remember when I had found this dome pendant at the thrift store as well. I believe it was $20. I painted it black. I took some handles from an old handbag and attached them and just tried to kind of repurpose something in a different way. But now that I have a place for this woven pendant, I thought let's remove the handles and now this can be our new ceiling light fixture. But because this is all it came with, I had to get a little creative, we'll call it, and figure out a way to be able to hang it safely. So I grabbed some heavy duty fishing wire and I basically just kind of weaved it through the top in order for the clasp to be attached to the dome pendant. And then for the actual light, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I needed to figure out a way to hang these magnetic light bulbs that are rechargeable. So I ordered these off of Amazon that I basically just stuck in there, and now the light can stay magnetically attached to the inside now of this dome pendant. So when the charge runs out, all I have to do is pull that magnetic piece down, charge up the light, and pop it back into place. Moving along now for wall decor. Previously, I had this kind of moody, large scale wall art in the space, and it just, again, didn't fit. And sometimes I think when we think about wall decor, we're so kind of focused on just it being wall art. But there are so many other things you can put on your wall that are, to me, a lot more interesting and can also add a little bit more practicality to a space. I really love these wall sconces from Pottery Barn, but one costs almost $40 and a set of 6 will cost $240. So I needed a lot of them because, again, we're trying to fill up this wall here. How this is meant to be hung is there is a kind of piece that attaches to the wall, and then you hook all of these candle holders on there. And for a small wall, that would make perfect sense. But again, we need to kind of spread these out as best as possible. So I went to Lowe's and I grabbed some O-ring hooks, and that is what we are going to use to kind of disperse all of these candle holders. In order to make these taper candle holders, I decided to grab these pieces from Lowe's as well, and I just connected them using some super glue gel to connect each one onto the wall. Like I mentioned, I needed these rings here, and I just wanted to unify everything with some textured black spray paint to give a more iron-like look. I did 2 coats and then I sealed them with a matte clear sealer, and then it was just time to hang them on the wall. I wanted each sconce to be staggered, but I wanted them to be symmetrical from the center point out. And because I'm short, rather than measure from the ceiling, I like to measure from the floor. Lost my pencil several times during this process, but I was able to kind of just, again, measure from the ground and then made that marking so that way the 2 on either side would be matching. Once we were able to get them all hung up, then it was time to add kind of the light component. I don't trust myself or my kids to be around this many candles that are actually on fire. So I like to go the battery operated rechargeable route. I will link these. These are my favorite. They give kind of like a flickering effect, which is really nice. And also they have a nice kind of warm colored light. Sometimes I feel they're so cool toned. So the wall sconces from the Goodwill were just $6. And then I had all these candles already because we hung them for Halloween last year. I did have to buy a pack of batteries, but under $20 to fill up this giant wall. It was a major savings, especially when you compare it to the insane Pottery Barn prices. Another thing I wanted to add to the space was some sort of a pin board that had a kind of linen-y fabric. The only one I found had these kind of fairy lights, and I think in a kind of tween room or a child's room, playroom, the fairy lights are fine, but I feel sometimes they come across a little juvenile, so I decided to remove them, as well as there was just one little spot that had some red paint, I think, so I just decided to take my magic eraser. This guy was just $3 from my local thrift shop, the Hartville thrift shop, and it is just a nice thing to put in any office because especially if you have kids, they're always bringing home art and papers and things like that, and it's just nice to be able to put it out on display, but in an aesthetic way. Another just kind of smaller thing that I wanted to do was, some of you guys know about a year ago now, my dad passed away, and my dad was like the best guitar player, and he every time would come and he would play the guitar. Like this is him playing the guitar for my son when he was really little in our old house. And everybody grieves differently, but I think for me, seeing his face is hard, but I still want to be reminded of him. So what I found a solution to that is to hang up the guitar, and then I just downloaded one of the songs he used to play for me and my sister growing up all the time. It's now a song that I sing for my kids. So if you're in a similar boat and you want that reminder but not necessarily a picture of them, this is one of, I'm sure, many options. There's definitely a theme going with a lot of scalloped edges, brass pieces, and a lot of stoneware as well. So when I found this tray here was originally from Target through the Threshold by Studio McGee line. Now, it did have quite a bit of wear and tear to it, but nothing that couldn't be fixed with either a magic eraser. I personally always like to start with the easiest option first, so I did just try to take a magic eraser to it, specifically more on those black spots there, but it was unfortunately not coming out with the magic eraser. So second option was we're gonna have to do some painting. So a no-fail paint combination that looks good every single time is Shiplap by Magnolia, and then you will go over that with some watered down antiquing wax to give an aged effect with a damp paper towel. I've done this so many times, and every time it comes out, I absolutely love the end result. I already had the spray paint and the antiquing wax, so I had everything for this project, so this tray really only cost me $3. Moving along now into some wall shelf options. This is an area where I feel you just have, you go to Target, you'll have your normal basic wall shelves, and that's fine. But then when you go to Magnolia's website, there is a lot of detail added to all of the shelving pieces, and those details come at a hefty price tag. So when I was at my local thrift shop, the Hartville thrift shop, I found this wall shelf here that was just $6. I believe the shelf is supposed to be used to hang up rifles, but I decided I was just going to turn this into a cute little mini wall shelf. Just separated the pieces from each other and just removed the sections from the sides that I obviously wouldn't be needing. To remove those sections off, I just used my miter saw, but if you don't have a miter saw, you could just use a miter box to just cut it down to the appropriate size, and then I just secured those pieces back in place. I did, however, want to keep the top because, again, like the Magnolia pieces, there's just these little added details that make them feel just a little bit more special. So I did have to cut those down just ever so slightly on the sides just so they fit in that slot a bit better. Before attaching those two pieces together, I did spray paint both sections there with some matte taupe spray paint, and then with a chip brush just adding some watered down antiquing wax to give a kind of faux grain effect. This paint combination is the exact one that we used on our stair rail that was very outdated and was so budget friendly to do it this way. Because I ended up keeping the initial hardware that the shelf came with, this really only cost me $6. I think it makes the perfect moment as I'm walking down the staircase. It ties in that same wood grain, and it was done so affordably because I shopped it secondhand. Starting this video off talking about mirrors, Anthropologie is really known for having really interesting and unique mirror options available on their website. However, they do come at a pretty hefty price tag. While you won't be able to find identical pieces, generally speaking, at the thrift store, you can find things that are really similar but so much more cost effective. For example, I found this black kind of wavy mirror that looks really similar to things I've seen on Anthropologie's website, but this mirror was only $5 originally from Pier 1 Imports for $150. So definitely a significant savings. The other thing I like to kind of take into account is how much work is going to go into this project piece. So there were some nicks and scratches taken out of the wood frame of this mirror, so I just used a color matching marker that is designed for wood, and this is how it turned out. For $5, I think I have a really similar look to something I would see on Anthropologie, but on a budget. In addition to secondhand stores, another store I want to make sure to mention in this video is shopping specifically the clearance through Marshalls and HomeGoods, because you can find really similar things that might, again, just need a tweak or two. So this hot pink mirror just felt a little bit juvenile, so we want to make it feel a little bit more vintage inspired. I taped off the mirror and then just went in with several different metallic spray paints that I already had on hand to get a more kind of vintage-like look. This mirror really just only cost me $5 because I had all of the other supplies already, and even comparing it to stores like Target, which would be considered affordable home decor stores, it's still a major savings by shopping the clearance section as well. Moving along now into accent furniture or just furniture in general, I think that during the summer months, at least in my thrift stores in my area, I notice a huge increase in the amount of furniture available, which of course just increases our odds of finding something really great. However, with that being said, generally the pieces that are in really great condition are a bit pricey, I've noticed, at the thrift store. So what I like to try to look for are pieces that could use a little bit of a makeover or refurbishing. So I found this tea cart here that was a really unique piece. It was just $15, but we had quite a bit of damage. We had some cracking going on. The trim would obviously need to be replaced, but it was overall still in really good condition. To start off this project, I just removed all of the pieces of trim that weren't really hanging on that great, because we are going to be going in with a little bit more of a detailed trim. There are so many different options at hardware stores for more decorative trim, and I feel like that definitely will fall in line with a more Anthropologie aesthetic. Just instead of picking something plain, you have the opportunity to make it feel a little bit more unique and special. Before adding any like Bondo or anything to kind of repair the piece, I just wanted to clean it really well, so I just vacuumed out the bottoms, as well as just taking a degreaser. I like to use the one from Dollar Tree. Once the piece is totally cleaned off, there were some really obvious like cracks and repairs that would need to be made to this piece that I could have just kind of started from scratch and just taken the wheels, but I kind of wanted to keep what was good already there. So I'm just going to fill the cracks as best as possible with this product. I will link in the description box below. It's called Quick Wood. It's a product by JB Weld that is paintable, and it's literally designed for filling gouges and cracks out of wood pieces. So with our new trim pieces attached and everything has been filled and then sanded, it was just time now to choose a paint color. And this is totally personal preference, but I love a pop of black in my space. It adds a more modern touch with the juxtaposition of all of the antique and vintage pieces I have. Went in with some satin black spray paint just to the wood pieces because I still liked that rusticity from the wheel part of this project. So I left that part as it was, but then painted the remainder in a nice satin black. When it comes to the styling of this cart, I think what I could really use this for right now in this season of life is to make me a little bit more excited to do my laundry. And studies show if you like the way something looks, you're a lot more likely to take care of it. So I decided we are going to make this into a little laundry cart station, and I'm going to style all of it using only thrifted or DIY'd accessories. So all of the glassware I've thrifted over time. Also, these towels I recently thrifted were just $1 a piece. These have been super helpful when I have a big spill to clean up or to wipe Murphy's paws when he comes in from being outside. Just a nice way to kind of create a little cleaning station moment, but in an affordable and aesthetic way. Moving along now into pottery. So many beautiful options at Anthropologie, but again, quite expensive. So you can find really great things at the thrift store, but it's just going to be a little bit more of a treasure hunt. So if there's a specific piece of pottery that you really love from Anthropologie, just do yourself a favor, take a screenshot of it on your phone. So then that way, when you're in the thrift store, don't even look at the color, the print, the pattern. It's truly amazing what a little bit of paint can do. I thrifted this piece of pottery I think about a year ago now for $3, and you know, I just grew tired of that print and pattern, so I can always just paint it into something that fits my aesthetic more rather than going and buying something. Even again from the thrift store, I have something right here at home. I have the paint here at home that I could just make a kind of distressed piece of pottery, but on a really tight budget. So as I mentioned earlier, I think Anthropologie has specific things that they're kind of known for, like the primrose mirror, but also these Minka pots. And I've never seen them anywhere except Anthropologie until last week when I was at HomeGoods. I found this one here. It is literally an exact dupe to the one from Anthropologie, but this one was only $16.99. And based on the size, this one would be over $50. So I just did my best to color match to some acrylic paint that I already had and applied it using a foam brush. Such an easy fix, and I think looks super similar to something I would find at Anthropologie, but on a budget. Moving right along now into textiles, there are so many amazing and luxe options at Anthropologie, but they are very expensive. I have seen one thing that is helpful is that when you shop off season at Anthropologie, at least at my Anthropologie in Cleveland, they have a whole room dedicated to their clearance, and you can oftentimes get a pretty good deal on a really high quality textile. But I think it's always worth looking at your thrift store to see what's available, because sometimes you can find exactly what you're looking for if you just do a little bit of digging. And my kind of rule of thumb when it comes to shopping textiles is as long as I can wash it in my washing machine, I feel that it's safe enough to bring home. I found this really beautiful soft pink pillow that will just go perfectly in my daughter's room. I liked that it had a zipper, which just makes washing that much easier. Took the insert that was in place out and then just placed my own inside. In addition to high quality pieces, you'll also notice a theme when it comes to shape. So there's a lot of scalloped edges with Anthropologie textiles. So when I found this tree skirt that was originally $30, but I just paid, again, $3.49 for it. And my thought for this was, now of course I could use this as a tree skirt come Christmas, but my thought was, what if I just folded it in half and then kind of made it into a headboard for my daughter's twin bed. Another area of textiles is doormats. Usually the doormats that I happen to find at the thrift store were kind of like donated for a reason. They're faded or there's something wrong with them. So I like to personally go to HomeGoods or Marshall's again to find things that are really similar. I found this one here that was on clearance for just $13. Now, of course, I could try to definitely DIY this myself, just buying some jute, grabbing some adhesive, but by the time I buy all of that stuff, in addition to the time it would take me to make it, I would be spending well over $13. So I always try to recommend projects to you guys that make sense not only budget-wise, but also for your time. If you are somebody who really wants to have a personalized doormat though, they also have these options there, which look so similar to the ones from Anthropologie, and you can literally place whatever you want in the middle, but the basic structure is kind of already done for you. So lighting at Anthropologie can be incredibly expensive. So just like every other category, find some lighting that you really love and then go into the thrift store with that intention. And usually, eventually, you'll find something that's really similar, but so much more affordable. So I found this really fun pendant light here that looks so similar to this one from Anthropologie that is sold out. All I really needed to do to this was switch out the light bulb and bend one or two pieces back into their kind of folded place, and that really wrapped it up for this project. I didn't have to paint anything, I didn't barely have to DIY anything, and it's such a fun moment in my daughter's bedroom. An element we haven't already discussed that you will want to incorporate if you love Hearth and Hand and you love Magnolia is black iron. And that is very kind of categorical with industrial decor as well as farmhouse. So when I came across this mailbox here that was just $20 at my local antique store, it was the perfect size, and it was kind of rare because the wall that this is going to be going on is very small. It was a little bit scratched up, so I just took some textured black spray paint by Krylon. I like this one, especially if you're trying to get a more kind of iron-like look. It gives you that kind of texture that iron has as well. I then just sealed it with a matte clear sealer, and this was the end result. Moving along now into some decorative box options. So this is one thing I'm actually going to purchase, is this first aid kit box, just because I've never seen anything look so cute as that. So I definitely think that's worth the investment. But other metal boxes you can definitely find at the thrift store. You just might have to do a little bit of digging and reimagining, maybe a little bit of painting. In addition to metal boxes, you'll want to look for leather boxes, or even just any box that you can wrap and then stack. So when I found this stack of 3 boxes for just $4 for all 3 of them, again, used my 35% off coupon. This tone of brown matches my new office so perfectly, and it was the perfect thing to add, again, a little bit of clothes storage, but also in an aesthetic way. Moving right along into some wall art options, this is where you can really save a ton of money by shopping secondhand. I find so many beautiful art pieces, mirrors that look so similar to what I would find on high-end websites, but for $5, $6, $7 for a mirror that is essentially in perfect condition. When it comes to wall art options, don't forget about the power of resale. So this is something that I wouldn't necessarily put in my space, but I know listed on Facebook Marketplace with some thrifted wreaths and some other thrifted fall decor I can sell not only quickly, but for profit, and that will basically just pay for my first aid kit wall decor piece. And that is girl math at its finest. But when it comes to wall art that you want to keep in your space, just remind yourself that if you like the frame but maybe don't necessarily like the artwork, you can always just add your own artwork. So I downloaded this one for free off of Canva, just popped it in the frame, and for only $1, I think I have something that looks super similar. Crate and Barrel and CB2 have a lot of really interesting options to choose from, but they often come at a pretty hefty price tag. So when it comes to the thrift store, I would say it's not impossible to find marble pieces, but usually the pieces that I seem to come across have a little bit of wear and tear to them and some staining that you just wouldn't be able to really clean off. So if you're just looking for one single piece, my suggestion is to check out HomeGoods, because they often do have a really great marble selection there. When it comes to the smaller scale furniture pieces, I think HomeGoods can sometimes be a little bit on the pricey side. So what I personally like to do is find something from the thrift store that I can flip and then add it to a piece that I either buy at HomeGoods or a piece that I've had previously. So at my local thrift shop, I ended up coming across this really tall fluted metal vase for just $2, and it was 16 inches tall, and I thought this would make the perfect base for like a little plant stand. Taking my self-etching primer, because it is a metal and I want to make sure that it prevents some scratching, so I'm just going to apply 2 coats of that self-etching primer. While that's outside drying, I have had this marble cheese tray for a while now, and somewhere along the way I lost one of the pegs there at the bottom. It broke off. So rather than donate it, I'm just going to take off the other 2, so then that way that can be the top of our little plant stand. So for color, this could obviously be whatever you choose, but I personally love the combination of marble and wood. Now, of course, this is metal, so in order to make it look like wood, I first painted a few coats of dark taupe spray paint. Once that was dry, I went over it with a bristle brush and some antiquing wax, just making long strokes until I get this kind of faux grain shine effect. In order to connect the two pieces together, I'm going to use a combination of E6000 and super glue gel, and that's just going to give a nice industrial strength hold since we're obviously not able to screw anything together. To find the center, I just like to measure the diameter of the top and then also what would be the base, subtract one from the other, whatever that number is divided in two will be the number that I'm looking for all the way throughout, making sure that it is in fact nice and centered. Because I already had the cheese tray and all of the other supplies for this project, this really only cost me a few bucks, and I think this makes a wonderful addition to any kind of little vignette or corner in my space. Moving along now into lighting, I absolutely love this area, specifically from Crate and Barrel and CB2. I think they have just really nice modern light fixtures, but they are quite expensive. And finding modern lighting at the thrift store can oftentimes be a bit of a treasure hunt. So when I found this really tall arched floor lamp and it was just $19.99, I thought for sure there was something wrong with it, and the only thing we could really find that was wrong with it is that it didn't have a shade. So I looked around at the thrift store for a while, and the only shade that I really loved was this one here. Now this specific light fixture is obviously for the ceiling, but as you can see here, the cording is a bit frayed and I wouldn't really feel totally comfortable putting that in my ceiling. And of course you can get it rewired, but I decided the only thing I really wanted from this piece, because it was only $6, was this kind of shade around here. So in order to connect these two pieces together, the arch floor lamp and this shade, because the spider fitter was way too narrow for the opening for the socket of the floor lamp, I just needed to remove it all together in order to connect the two pieces. So rather than actually putting anything around the socket of the floor lamp, I'm just going to actually hang it from the top. And to do that, I just used a zip tie and some fishing line, a temporary solution until I can find an appropriate spider fitter. I think this is a really great way to kind of get the look for less, and this cost under $30. Moving along now into our kitchen items, so many beautiful options at Crate and Barrel. All of the bowls, the baskets, the cutting boards, so beautiful, but a little bit more than I want to spend. So for example, I loved this cutting board here, but it was $150. So when I was at my local antique store, I found both of these for 12 bucks a piece. While of course the Crate and Barrel version is much bigger, these are so much more appropriate for the scale of my kitchen, and they made it perfect to style with. I didn't need to DIY anything. Just makes the perfect little rustic addition to my kitchen space. Moving along now into textiles, so many beautiful options at Crate and Barrel and CB2 in really high quality fabrics, but you can also find really great pieces at the thrift store. For example, most recently at the Goodwill bins, I found this Casaluna king size blanket in this kind of like nutmeg cinnamon color, which I think is so perfect for fall. Now, because everything is priced by the pound and anything over 10 pounds is then half off, I only spent $6 for a king size high quality blanket. Another really popular textile is Sherpa and boucle, of course, for fall. So when I was at my local thrift shop, the Hartville thrift shop, I came across two of these collapsible ottomans that were of this Sherpa material, and they were in perfect condition. I don't think these were ever used. And these were just $4 a piece. So the only thing I guess I didn't really love about these was they just felt a little small. And one way that you can kind of make pieces feel a little bigger is of course to add a base to the bottom. So this is just a wooden bowl. Some of you might remember though, when I made this lantern out of a plant stand and a waste bin several videos back. So I just decided to separate that plant stand again. But this time, because the base of the ottoman was just a bit wider, I just removed that connecting piece, and thankfully I had this scrap wood in my garage, and I had barely just enough to kind of create a new base for the ottoman, just to, again, give it a little bit more height and make it feel a little bit bigger. Taking my measurements and then out to my miter saw, I'm just going to cut down the pieces of wood and connect them kind of in the shape of an X. To connect the wood pieces together, I just did so using some L brackets, and then for the bottoms, I just use a Craig jig. You could also just L bracket the legs to the base as well if you don't have a Craig. The point of doing that is to kind of make pocket holes so you don't see it from the top at least. So after just connecting all of the pieces together, I just needed to, of course, spray paint it all over again. So I just did so using some matte black spray paint, and then all that was left to do was slide our ottoman inside. A sneaky expense in home decor and just furnishing your space is glassware. So the wine glasses, the drinking glasses, the champagne flutes, it adds up over time. And this is probably an area I would never buy retail, because I find so many beautiful options all the time at the thrift store. But this also includes cake stands and vases. I recently found this vase here for just $5. It reminded me so much of this one from CB2. Just decided to pop some little florals in here. No DIY involved. I think it looks great and budget friendly. Moving along now into storage solutions. I think that this is one area specifically I see often people just going a cheaper plastic route, because you know, storage pieces at high-end stores are really expensive, and if you're really the only one seeing them, you don't want to break the bank doing so. So I always recommend checking your thrift stores to see what's available. Like, I found these really beautiful kind of linen canvas baskets, just took the pieces off, gave them a good clean, and they're good as new. Baskets like this at Crate and Barrel can be a small fortune, but because I thrifted them, they were just a few dollars a piece. Next up, let's talk about some outdoor accessories. So through the Magnolia line, I love this tone of green that she uses. It's got definitely a brown undertone. Found this really beautiful wreath at the Goodwill bins for a few dollars. I might add a ribbon. I don't necessarily feel that it needs it, but I think it's the perfect way for like early fall decorating. Wall decor from Anthropologie, definitely one of the more expensive items that Anthropologie sells, but there are so many different options that I really feel it can appeal to almost anybody. However, another place that you can find really unique and interesting pieces are at the thrift store, and mirrors are one of those home decor expenses that can get really expensive when you shop retail. So thrifting mirrors is one of my favorite ways to decorate a space and save a ton of money in the process. For example, I found this mirror here for just $14.99. Something comparable at Anthropologie would be hundreds of dollars. This mirror just had a few minor imperfections that could just be easily fixed with some gold leaf rub and buff. Because I had the gold leaf already, this really only cost $14.99, and I think it is the perfect kind of starting off point to style any credenza, any dresser, any entryway table, but it was done so affordably because I shopped secondhand. When it comes to lighting, I think a lot of times from what I've heard in the comments lately is that you never seem to find really great lamps at your thrift store. So one solution I have found, if you are okay with using battery operated or rechargeable lights, is to look in the vase section of your thrift store and see if there's something you could flip, and then just find a shade at your thrift store as well. So this vase was $5 and the shade was just $3. So in total, $8. So my initial plan for this flip was to just kind of tape off the bottom, tape off the top, because I kind of liked that brushed brass, but I didn't like the green part of the vase. So I went in with some watered down mortar mix and just kind of dabbed it all over the green part of the vase. and then I took it outside and did a couple applications of black flat spray paint, and I just really wasn't loving the way it was looking. So we've basically gotten to this point here, and I just still really don't like it. I just feel like it's not what I had in my mind. And I'm gonna just do the whole thing in one material. I think the mix of materials is what's really bothering me. Like, I don't like the way that looks. I think it just looks kind of sloppy. That's gonna be kind of our last ditch effort, and we'll see if we can get it to look kind of like more like a vintage clay pot lamp. So I gave a couple applications of some stone spray paint to the entire thing now, and then let that dry before then going in again with that same black flat spray paint. Once the stone spray paint and then the black spray paint dried, I then just sealed it with a matte clear sealer. And this is fine, you can stop here, but I like to always kind of refer back to what I'm trying to kind of dupe or even just replicate or take inspiration from. And all of the pieces that I was either pinning or saving to my phone had a little bit of distressing to them. So I went in and just kind of rubbed a little bit of baking powder throughout the entire vase just to give a little bit of variation in that texture. Once that was kind of settled, I then took a damp rag and I just wiped off any of the excess, and I tried to just kind of wipe it basically from side to side so it was nice and consistent the way it kind of dried down. For this to function like a light, these are actually lights that we use outside. We can use them for camping. These are great because all you have to do is charge them, and the charge on these actually lasts a really long time. So I just took kind of narrow-necked glass vase and I popped the part that would usually have a bottom piece, like a bottom piece that you would screw that into, because that was too wide to sit inside of this vase now. So I just decided to use this little glass jar here, combine those two pieces together. Once those two pieces were then combined, I just needed to stick that entire thing inside of our makeshift lamp base, and I then needed to take the lampshade, put that on top, kind of through it, if that makes sense. So then that way the light bulb, or the part that gives off light, can sit and then get screwed into this metal base. Then now with the lamp completed, it's time to figure out how we're gonna style it. So I knew I wanted to style it on our nightstand. So if you ever need some inspiration, also look at that. So they have the light there, a couple books, a little distressed pottery piece there. Also have more than just that option, couple books, little pottery, and some glasses. And you can kind of just get a lot of inspiration that way as well. Just trying to replicate as best as possible using secondhand items to get a really similar look. Because I think sometimes that's where, at least I know, I feel like I get stumped on, is how to actually incorporate the piece into my space. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this project on lighting that you're using, multiple times a day, but on a lamp that you might not use that often, like in a guest room, I think this is a really nice option, and it was so cost effective because I shopped secondhand. Moving along now into some storage options. So Pottery Barn has so many beautiful options that are really truly timeless pieces that you can probably keep for a lifetime. Popping over now to my mom's living room space, she has this coffee table currently. She has complained that she doesn't have enough storage in her living room, and then also this coffee table is just really not the sturdiest. So I've been trying to keep my eyes out for something that provides her with a little bit of storage, but she can also use as a coffee table. So when I found this ottoman, it was $14.99 at the Hartville thrift shop. Right off the bat, I knew I was going to need to reupholster this ottoman, as well as several repairs were going to need to be made. But when I did a Google lens on this piece, turns out that this is originally from Kohl's and it's almost $500. So I felt like for $14.99, even if it really doesn't work out, it's worth trying to make do with what's here. I've said this before, I know people like to just reupholster over old fabric, but I personally like to take everything off, and that is basically so you can see how the initial fabric was applied, and then you just get an overall really clean finish on the fabric that you choose to add. Started off by just removing all of the fabric from all of the lids of the coffee table ottoman, and then I went over to Walmart and found this faux leather fabric. You guys know I do try to really source everything secondhand, but because I needed so much fabric and it needed to obviously all be the same fabric, I decided to go the retail route for this piece. A couple things my mom asked, because my kiddos are over there sometimes at grandma's house. I wanted to make sure that if it got dirty, she wouldn't have to reupholster it all over again, and it's just gonna be easy to kind of maintain and clean. The other thing she requested was that it didn't have a pattern on it, just because the rug that would be sitting underneath of this ottoman was very vibrant and heavily patterned. So we wanted something just nice and simple, which also works out great because when you have patterned fabric, it is really hard to get everything just right and perfect, especially on a big piece like this. So if you're new to reupholstering, I would recommend choosing a fabric that is solid, that you have some give, you have some stretch to it, and that you can clean it easily. Once I was able to separate the tray part from all of the kind of cushion sections, it was really easy to reupholster, and then I just had to simply reattach those pieces back together with my screwdriver. For the base of the ottoman, again, we're gonna remove the old fabric to see kind of how it was assembled to begin with. Also needed to remove the bottom section from this ottoman, and that provides me, again, an opportunity to see how the wheels were installed. So when I go to install new wheels, I know what I need to do. So as you saw, I cut down one side of the ottoman, and then to remove the rest of the fabric, I just kind of pulled from the inside out. And in doing that, I did lift some of that inside liner, but that's okay because we're just gonna staple that together anyhow. But I needed to remove all of the fabric from the inside as well as all around the perimeter of the ottoman. I did have to hand sew a few things. The first thing was where all of the fabric was going to meet in the middle, that kind of divides all of the storage units. And then also I didn't hand sew, but I just buzzed it through the sewing machine. After taking the measurements from the chevron fabric, I just applied it to my fabric and then slipped it on all around the sides, just kind of working my way down, making sure to not pull too tight or pull too far down until all of the sides were completely covered. After I covered kind of the inside that divided those sections that I mentioned earlier that I hand sewed, I then needed to wrap around from the outside going in. So the easiest way I found to do this is to lay your fabric out, and if you need to make any kind of cuts to allow for a different piece to kind of fold into it, just follow that down. It's basically like a puzzle, and you just want to make sure that you're pulling the fabric but not pulling so taut that you create ripples. Once that part was done, I just needed to finish kind of stapling all around the perimeter of the inside of each ottoman. Once the fabric was secure and in place, I just needed to remove the excess fabric. With the inside complete, I then just needed to, of course, staple the bottom of the ottoman, and again, just to remove the excess fabric. Before we apply any kind of barrier fabric to the bottom, I needed to install new wheels. So these ones I ordered off of Amazon. I will link them down below in the description if you are interested, but they were very affordable and they give a kind of vintage high-end look. So I put the 3 legs on, but because that piece was broken off, I need to go to my stash and see if I can just cut a small piece of wood to put inside of here. I am going to go out to my stash and see if I have something that's at least the same depth, and then I'll just use my miter saw to cut it down to the appropriate size. I think I'm just gonna take my nail gun now, kind of pick a point that's farther out first to make sure it doesn't poke out on the other side, because this isn't the thickest thing in the world. So I'm gonna just pop this in here, and then I'll start probably over here to get this inside. With this piece secure and in place now, one thing I do have to do that I didn't have to do on any of the others was bore out a little hole here because the screw is too long. So I need to make a hole in here so that way the screw can exceed into the wood, and then I can attach that remaining leg there. Another issue, gosh, this thing has just had like one issue after the other. But hopefully if you can take at least one of these tips away from this project, that you'll be able to tackle something you find at your thrift store. This looks like maybe somebody was trying to get into here and couldn't figure out. You just need to pop these out. and then there's screws in there, and then you can just do that. I don't know exactly what happened. Really, we have to do something, because that's the beauty of this coffee table ottoman situation, is that you can use it as both. Maybe make like an insert of tile instead. However, this is a unique size. This is not like a standard tile size. So we're gonna go the peel and stick tile route. So let me show you what I found. So this was kind of my thought for this, to remedy there's only one of those that was like that. But you want to just keep it consistent throughout the entire project. So I thought doing like an insert of like a checker pattern might be the way to go. So I'm just going to cut these down to the appropriate size and we'll stick them in there. So total cost for this ottoman coffee table, between the $14.99 for the actual ottoman, the faux leather fabric, the wheels from Amazon, and the tile from Menards, I am still well under $100 for an ottoman that can function like a coffee table that also provides closed storage. And anything even remotely comparable at Pottery Barn would cost a small fortune. So my mom saw the coffee table, she absolutely loved it, and I think it's going to be a great addition to her space. Next up are all of the decorative accents at Pottery Barn. There's so many beautiful options there, and that shopping cart can really start to get expensive. By the time you add a couple vases, a couple decorative accessories, it can be in the hundreds very quickly. So I found this beaded garland. I was not crazy for the twine tassels, so I just removed them, and it's a super easy fix. Just make sure that that knot was nice and tight. Cut that part off, and I think it looks much more similar now to the one from Pottery Barn, but only cost me a couple bucks. All of these pieces I find at the Goodwill bins, and because everything is weighed by the pound and this is a glassware item, this little vase here just cost me about $2. Another thing I like to make sure too is that I'm comparing things that are actually similar. So this vase is just about 7 inches tall, and the ones from Pottery Barn are maybe just a little bit taller, but a lot more expensive. Next month, we're gonna be doing a video all about shelf styling. So it is so important to kind of collect all of these little knickknacks, these little pieces that are really just perfect for shelf styling. Anytime you see them at the thrift store, because they're gonna be so much more affordable than anything you will find retail. So looking at the Pottery Barn setup, they had a woven tray, and they had a couple books and 2 of these like little terracotta jugs, okay? So that's kind of what you wanna keep in mind. If you're at Pottery Barn and you see that setup and you're like, I love that, take a picture of it on your phone and then go to the thrift store. And even if you don't find all of the pieces, if you just find 1 or 2 pieces, eventually you'll come across enough pieces to create that entire vignette. So this came from the Goodwill bins. It is a little bit damaged, but this is also a really easy fix, right? So we can just fix that corner there. This is from Linden. JCPenney. So, I mean, the fact that it was probably like maybe $3 is a pretty good price, because it is a little bit heavy. And then you guys saw this. This is a magazine that I thrifted, and I think I paid like less than $1 for. So if we take this here, because the book that they had kind of had a lot of greenery on it, and then we take our little jugs here, right? I mean, right? Like this, I know that it's not identical, but even if you find things that are similar enough, you can get really, really close. And this whole situation probably cost $10. So one thing that's always kind of bothered me in our kitchen is that the window is not centered on the wall. After we removed the corner cabinet from the kitchen and we installed shelves, it kind of opened up a lot of wall space. And I've been seeing a lot of influencers and designers put hanging plants in their kitchen. Usually I don't love this look because it tends to swing a little bit too boho for my space. But when I found these at the thrift store, they were at the Goodwill bins, I paid about $5 for both of them, and I only really needed the one for what I'm gonna show, but it's always nice when you find a good quality hanging planter to pick it up, especially during the spring and summer months. And these were both in great condition. They just really needed to be cleaned. So I grabbed some Dawn dish soap, took them outside, hosed them down, and let them dry out in the sun. Grabbed a plant from Lowe's, and then I just took the hook that was already on that fern, and then I just took one of the chains from the other planter to let this hang down a little bit farther. And I don't know if I'll keep it forever, but I think it's a nice way to experiment with different kind of styling, but on a budget. Moving along now into some storage solutions. So if you're just comparing apples to apples, a canvas basket from the thrift store that is brand new, originally from Home Goods, is just $2. Each of these white towels that are still in really good condition are just $1 a piece. Popping over now to Pottery Barn, the cheapest towel is $19.50. And if you compare a similar kind of canvas tote bag, it was gonna be $59. So very quickly, this can become over $100. Moving right along now into textiles, which is another area through Anthropologie that is quite expensive, but it's a little bit more justified for me because I know some of the materials that they're using are expensive materials to work with. But that's not to say that eventually you might also find those same sorts of materials at the thrift store. So not Anthropologie, but I did find this Our House pillow for just $3 at my local thrift shop. It is made from high quality materials, but it was so cost effective because I shopped secondhand. Another area that is worth checking, now I usually don't have a ton of luck in this area of the thrift store, but every now and then you can find a really high quality piece. So not, again, Anthropologie, but I did find this CB2 runner that is usually hundreds of dollars for just $18 at my local thrift shop. Now, Anthropologie is really known for having these kind of abstract, unique pieces of home decor, so I thought this was super fitting. I loved its kind of high contrast look, and again, it just felt so soft, so quality, but so affordable because I shopped secondhand. Thrifting for lighting generally goes like this for me. I'll find a lamp base that I love, but it either doesn't have a shade, or I don't like the shade, or the shade is damaged. Or I'll just find a really great shade, but I don't like the base. So it is kind of like finding the perfect marriage of a shade to a base. So I found a base that I really loved. This is the base of an Ashley furniture lamp that is almost $150. So I needed to find a shade for it though. The only shade that was the right scale was this one here, and unfortunately it was bent quite a bit. So to bring it back to life, I just grabbed my steamer and I just steamed out all of those creases. And I would say it wasn't a perfect solution, but it did work very well in kind of giving this lampshade another life. And just simply combined the two pieces together. So under $30 for this lamp. So looking in the lighting can really save a significant amount of money by shopping at your thrift stores, and eventually you'll be able to combine all the pieces together for a really beautiful and unique look. Moving along now into glassware, Anthropologie has some of the most beautiful glassware, but you can also find great glassware, unique pieces at the thrift store for so much more affordably. Based on what I found online on Etsy, the exact same one, this silver is like polished and everything, like it looks like brand new, is going for $95, which I only paid like $7 for this. Now, although I'm not a reseller, I always recommend kind of going into your thrifted purchases knowing exactly what you're bringing home, just to make sure you are really getting a quality piece. Another piece that I found was this huge glass vase, or so I thought it was a glass vase. So again, doing a little bit of research, it was a terrarium that was just missing the top piece, but I only paid a few dollars for it because it was a glassware item, and glassware items are just 49 cents per pound. So now with the money that I saved, I can afford to go to Trader Joe's and buy real fall florals for my entire space and still be well under the amount that it would cost for just one glass terrarium from Anthropologie. Found this really beautiful light here. The only thing about this light that I did not love was the color of the cord. So that is a really easy fix. Depending on where you're going to see the cord, I would try to match it. So if it's gonna be up against like a white wall or on a white dresser, I would just use that color electrical tape to kind of conceal it as best as possible. Lamps like these from Magnolia are always over $100. So the fact that this guy was just $5 is a major savings. Another area I love from Hearth and Hand and Magnolia are their vases. You can find really beautiful, kind of vintage inspired vases there, but they are kind of expensive, so I do recommend checking your thrift store. What often happens at the thrift store though is you'll find the exact color, the exact shape that you want, but there might be some sort of situation happening. My recommendation before you bring it home, just give it a little scratch test and see if it will come off easily. And thankfully in this example, it did. Vases that look just like this from Magnolia can be a small fortune, so the fact that this one was just $3 had just one little quick imperfection that we needed to adjust, and now I have it in the budget to buy real foliage or real florals. Trader Joe's is by far the best place to find really beautiful, seasonally appropriate florals on a budget. So we're just going to take these Magnolia stems. These are great. I feel like they transition really well into Christmas and they last a really long time. I would say it's near impossible to find a large scale vase and statement making florals for under $10 if you shop retail. But by shopping secondhand, this is super achievable and in my humble opinion, just as beautiful. If you're somebody who loves Hearth and Hand and Magnolia, odds are you probably really love elements of rustic and wooden decor. However, those detail-oriented pieces do come at a pretty hefty price tag, especially when you're shopping through the Magnolia line. While you might not be able to find exactly that at the thrift store, there are definitely ways to kind of make them feel a little bit more Magnolia inspired, but on a budget. For example, I love this oversized wood twisted bowl. This is basically just a wood bowl with this very special detail on the rim. While I was shopping at the Goodwill bins, I came across several of these small little wood tables here, which ended up being just under $4 because everything again is priced by the pound. Initially, my plan for this was to take this leftover twisted trim that I had from previous projects, but because the top of the table was not at a perfect 90-degree angle, it wasn't going to meet up exactly the way I wanted it to. So I opted to just take this wooden box and just remove these little wood feet from the bottom. From the top of the table, after removing the legs, I just simply cut out the pieces that the legs would screw into. There's no need to reinvent the wheel here. We can just simply attach those to the bottom of our box. Before attaching those legs, I did want to add the twisted trim on top of here because I think it was just a nice detail to add to something that is otherwise basic. To attach the decorative trim, I just used my nail gun, but if you don't have a nail gun, you can still totally do this using some liquid nails or just good old-fashioned nail and a hammer. Once everything was in place, I just took some heavy-duty shears and removed any of the excess from all of the corners. Sprayed it down with some taupe spray paint and then layered over that with antiquing wax, first using kind of a typical bristle brush and then went over it actually to soften it with a makeup brush just to give it a more subdued look. Little side tables, little stools like these are great because they add a lot of visual interest but provide a little bit of functionality too. I have a little bit of concealed storage here as well as just adding another surface to style in my bathroom. One of my favorite things that Magnolia carries are their shelves with pegs and wall hooks. They do a really beautiful job making things just feel really special. But unfortunately, they can be pretty pricey. So when I found that Magnolia basket, I also found this set of 5 wall hooks, and I've never seen wall hooks that looked quite like this. Something about them just felt very like rustic and industrial, which is perfect if you love a Magnolia aesthetic. Started off by just removing those hooks from this shelf here because my neighbor was getting rid of some wood, so he said, go ahead, take whatever you want. So took one of these scrap pieces of wood, just measured to make sure it was going to be the same length as the bottom piece where the wall hooks will be going inside of. Also just going to remove these hanging brackets temporarily so that way when I attach this piece to now our shelf piece, I get a nice kind of flush look in the end. I also like to add some sort of adhesive. This could be wood glue, hot glue, something to just kind of keep it in place, as well as a bracket before nailing everything together. Filling any nail holes or holes in general with wood filler and then sanding that down once it's dried. Wiped off any excess, and then it was time for paint. Doing our same paint technique just because we know that Magnolia look really leans into that wood grain. So we're going to again go in with taupe spray paint, water down some antiquing wax with a fine bristle brush, and just making long strokes over the entire piece. All that was left to do now was just reattach that rod that hung all of the hooks as well as the brackets to hang it from the back. And this really wrapped up this project. This is a really simple way to just add a little bit more functionality maybe to any kind of wall shelves you might have in your space, but in a really budget-friendly way. I think one thing that people really love about Hearth and Hand and Magnolia is she takes items that you really do need, like paper storage and just storage in general, but she makes them look so beautiful. Oftentimes what you'll find at the thrift store, at the Goodwill bins especially, is not maybe exactly what you need, but you have all of the materials to make what you need, if that makes sense. So I found 2 of these wood letter trays, and I'm pretty sure these come from Target, and paper storage like this that you put like on a shelf just really does not work for me. So I like things to be hung up on the wall as much as possible. So I ended up just removing the back of one of the letter trays because I want to make that now the front of one of these so I can hang it up on the wall. I did have to remove a small little sliver off of that section there so that way it could fit nice and flush inside of the other letter tray. But then when I put it in, I realized I needed to also remove a section from the top of this piece here. So I just placed it inside of the letter tray and just measured out how much I was going to need to remove so that way I would be able to actually see the paper inside. Once that piece was cut down and in place, I just flipped it on its side and used my nail gun on either side just to make sure it was going to be nice and secure. For a little decorative touch, I find these kind of brackets on like paper boxes all the time at the bins. To finish it off, when I cut that wood piece down, it left some kind of shreds on either side. So I just added a little bit of watered down wax to the entire thing just to give it a more seamless look. Added a means to hang it from my peg rail, and I think this is going to be super helpful. My kids are always bringing home all types of papers, so this I think is just going to keep it nice and organized, but in a really beautiful aesthetic way, but on a budget.